final installment was about extended fryer rearing a project, experimental project that we conducted Tatsamenie Lake from 2008 to 2016. As I mentioned before, the first several years of the project, actually first 10 years, if you look at it closely, our survival of 8 to smolt survivals for the enhanced fry was actually less than the wild fry. And the whole purpose is to use the hatchery incubation to increase survivals. And typically, your hatchery incubation egg to fry will be around 70%. Ours is about 72%, not 78, but close to it. And then the wild fry egg to smolt survival ranges, or egg to fry, I should say, ranges 10 to 20. So that's the hatchery advantage that supposedly you have to take advantage of, and that wasn't occurring. So after beginning in '98, we started all these different outplant techniques and research into the lake itself, and long and short of it, after 10 years, we were able to bring the survivals up to about 3 times what the wild survival were by adjusting the outplant techniques, the timing. I mean, that's the real interesting part of this whole project, I think, is that work. Suffice to say that it's timing, it's where, and it's how those fry are outplanted is very critical into the survival. Some systems, it seems like you can dump the fry out of an airplane at 500 feet and get great survivals, and others you have to be very, very precise in just how those fry are outplanted, particularly if they're unfed fry. So this is kind of what we were at around 2007 is our wild egg to smolt survival was about 1.8%, and the best we could do for our enhanced survival was about 4.8. It actually was a little bit higher than that, around 5%. So getting around that three times multiplier, but that wasn't good enough for everybody involved. Of course, you had to try and do better, and that direction from the panel was to carry on, try and improve the survivals, try and do something. So some of the research that was done in 2001 and 2 suggested that the highest fry mortality that occurred with the enhanced fish was the transition from the littoral to the limnetic zone. And typically the Tatsamenie fry, they'll stay in the littoral zone for about a month and a half, up to about between 1 and 2 grams from emergence, and then they'll make this transition into the limnetic zone and start feeding on the zooplankton in the limnetic zone. In the littoral zone, they key in primarily on dipteran insect larvae, benthic invertebrates, other benthic invertebrates. In 1999 and 2000, just as an aside, we actually did some long-term holding of fry, just to see if there wasn't any latent mortality. We were just investigating, why is their survival so low? So we did some long-term holding right from June through to September, and just feeding these fish a maintenance diet. It was just looking for latent mortality after the outplanting. And as it turned out, the Northern Fund investment started to pay off, and there was some Northern Fund money coming available in 2008. So Ron was, I'll blame this all on Ron, it was his idea, looking, he referred to some work that was done at Hugh Smith Lake, where they reared fry in net pens there, and as part of a restoration project over 3 years, and they were able to achieve 8 to smolt survivals in the 32% range. And we thought, well, maybe if we can bypass this high mortality event at Tatsamenie Lake and put those fish directly into the limnetic zone, we might see comparable survivals. That was the rationale. So in 2008, we constructed four net pens at Tatsamenie Lake. Because they're relatively small fish, it was 1/8 inch mesh, and it was felt that we would have to raise these fish in these 1/8 inch mesh up to about 2 grams, after which we would be able to increase the size of the mesh and essentially get better exchange rate because all the flow would be just simply passed through the net pens in the lake. The net pens are anchored out in the lake in two separate sites, and the camp is right around here, so we're too far away from the camp. These were chosen to get out of the effects of the prevailing south wind that comes down the lake, and just provide a little bit of protection from the wind drift. Well, on June 9th, 400,000 fry were bought in from Seneshan Hatchery. 100,000 fish placed in each pen. It came in at a 0.5 gram, and so the initial loading rate was pretty low as per design. Standard kind of fish culture techniques and feeding, I'm not going to go into that too much. One point is that we just had the 4 pens, so the idea is we'd use a high pressure fire hose to clean the pens off in situ, and because they get plugged up pretty quickly with feces and just flocculent and algae and pollen and so on that's floating around in the lake. And so that was done as required or weekly. Initially, of course, it wasn't too much of an issue. Long story short is just after 2 weeks, we started to see the first sign of IHN exhibited in pens 1 and 2, and so those fish were delivered to the lab at Juneau pathology lab, and after screening, they came back positive, and then after 3 weeks, we saw the outbreak start in pens 3 and 4, and those fish were all destroyed as per our protocol. So that was that. And I won't go into some of the reasons why, but probably related to low DO and poor exchange rates, possibly, and a spike in temperature. Christine talked yesterday about these stresses and so on, but that's not really what I want to talk about right now, but it happened, and so that was it. So, that was the end of that, but it maybe should have been the end, but it wasn't. So with the triumph of hope over experience, we went back in 2009 and revisited, and we never really tested that hypothesis whether pre-smolts would give an advantage to survival. So we had 4 million fry that were scheduled to be outplanted in 2009, so we proposed an onshore rearing project of 100,000 fry, just a pilot project using virus-free water in shore-based rearing troughs, just to see if we could test this hypothesis. And we bring them up to 1.5 grams, 2 grams in the trough, transfer them into a 1/2 inch mesh, like a larger mesh net pen, and hold them for a short period, feed them up to a little bit larger, and release them. And so, very low tech, and so we made a little dam in this high gradient creek that comes off the mountain, and it is obviously an IHN-free or fish-free water source. We got a couple of surplus cap troughs from DFO Whitehorse that were in the yard, slung them in with a helicopter. Dipac from Juneau donated some extra pipe and some valves, and we bought in 100,000 fry, and they were reared in 2 cap troughs in the virus-free water. We reared to about 2 grams in the troughs, and then we transferred them to the lake pen, and we released them in mid-lake July, about mid-July, I should say, at 2.5 grams. Most of those fish out-migrated very quickly after release. They out-migrated as pre-smolts, but as it turned out, they were actually smolts. We did a osmoregulatory challenge on these fish, and that they were true smolts. They were not fry. So in 2010, that's a very small group. They went out early. We weren't really able to evaluate it properly, so we didn't kill any fish. So we're going to move on. We expanded it to 200,000. We needed a better water source, so we moved the whole trough operation to a better water source, more reliable, just a larger volume. And this site has been used from 2010 through 2016. That's the same idea, just a primitive little dam, impound the water, and we piped it into 4 cap troughs. Of course, you need lids. We have electric fence around it to keep the larger animals out, and very primitive but simple operation. It's not without its risks. Sometimes you have high flood events, and this was before we had the trough set up in the spring, but often during the early part of the fry feeding area, I mean, it was precarious water supply, and it wasn't without risk, but it is experimental. So in this case, the fish would come in, but we couldn't dump them right in the troughs, of course. So it was a bucket brigade. Basically, this is the transport tank that Snettisham uses. And the fish are just siphoned from the tank, bucket brigade into the troughs. And most of the time the fish come in about 0.6 grams. And they're fed a diet of EWAS 1 and 2 over there initially. And conversion rate is 2%. Our flow rates are about 250 liters a minute per trough, maximum 50 K per trough. And the density, so that's the density range over the course of the holding. It's very primitive, but we do actually try and use standard IHNV avoidance protocol and disinfect and use protective clothing and so on when you're working with the fish, and disinfect all the gear between cleaning the troughs and so on. So once the fish are reach about 2 grams, we put them back out in the lake and transport it to holding pens. And in these holding pens, we actually have moved about 5 kilometers down from the outlet to make sure we don't get any passive flushing of fish after they're planted in the lake. And in the lake, we increased the feed rate a bit from 2% up to 3% body weight per day, and the densities are very low, 50 K per pen, and typically have very good exchange rates with the large mesh pens. The DO differential between the lake and the pen never usually exceeds about 0.2 parts per million. Then the pens are towed out in the lake and released passively. We just drop the margins of the net down, and the free smolts passively swim out, and so we don't have to handle, no handling associated with it. This is just kind of a typical growth rate we see in our fry in the troughs are in the blue, and then once they're in the lake, they're in the green. The low temperatures in the trough, because it's a creek-fed system that's results from snow melt, basically. So there's a fairly high rate of temperature change from the morning to the late evening, and then once the fish are into the lake, as time goes on over the summer up to mid-August, the temperatures go up a little bit more. So that's why we boost the feeding rate up once they go to the lake. They would take much more than that, than 3% per day, of course, but we hold it down at 3% body weight per day. So the project was successful in rearing fry to the 4 to 5 gram pre-smolt stage. There's been no IHN losses over this 8 years of rearing. Conversion rates are basically what you would expect. Last 3 years, we've extended the lake residency. We've got a little bit bolder and increase, held the fish a little longer and increase the release size overall. And of course, I mentioned the growth rate's limited in the early on by the trough temperatures. Fairly low mortality. We did have a bacterial issue in 2015, and we had about 13% loss, and that happened over 3 weeks because we were dealing with this and we didn't know what it was, and those samples had, it's a remote project, the samples have to get flown out and they go down to PBS. We get results, well, no, it's not a parasite, it's not IHN, it's not this. So it took a while to respond to it, but anyway, that's why the losses would have been less if we had been able to treat it right away like we needed to. And that group was released directly into the lake. We didn't hold them once they were healthy enough to release. We didn't want to push it any further past that. And we attempted to maintain a consistency in the rearing methods. And 4 out of those 8 years, those fish smoltify before they're released. You can see it in the pens. They start to lose their par marks. They start raising around. You can just tell they want to leave, and those fish go out right away as 0+ fish. And like I say, we do the osmoregulatory competence on those, and they are true smolts going out. And we don't have a reason why some have gone out at 0+ and some will actually, the majority stay in. There's always some small component that will go out as 0+. Sometimes it's 10, 15%. It's never 0, but some years it's very high. It's basically they all go out within 2 weeks. And this, I was trying to figure out how I could present this that it wasn't too confusing even to me. But if we look at the top graph, egg to smolt, this is a wild, which is sort of our baseline. And the directly planted fry into the lake, this is what you would expect. You have about a 3% or threefold increase in survival of the directly planted fry versus the wild fry because of, like I mentioned before, because of the incubation at the hatchery. And these are the reared fry here. And the eggs to smolt survivals, which is pretty obvious. Those years where those smolts go out as 0+ fish, you're going to have pretty spectacular egg to smolt survival because those fish are subjected to the predation and selection pressures in the lake itself. So this is 2009 brood year, and this is 2012 brood year that the fish went out as 0+. In this case, 10 to 15% went out as 0+, so you have a much lower egg to smolt survival, but certainly much better than the wild rate. And I'm not going to say too much about this other than the directly planted and wild have the same smolt to adult survival, but interestingly, the reared fry in general have a much lower smolt to adult survival. I guess the end result you really want to look at is, well, what's the egg to adult survival? And so far, we've had 4 full returns. Most of the adults returning to the Tatsamenie system are 5-year fish, 3 ocean, 2 fresh water. The first year actually saw our best survivals, egg to adult of 1.5% in the reared fry. And for Tatsamenie, where the average fecundity is 4,000 eggs per female, that translates into about 60 fish per female production. So it's quite a bit better than we've seen to date, obviously. These are years that it gets quite complex in the different smolt sizes and so on, and maybe the reasons why some survivals are lower than others. I don't want to go into it, but these are the years basically they went out as 1+ fish. And then in brood year 2012, that's the year, if you recall from the previous slide, where most of them went out as 0+ again. So you see a bump up in the egg to adult survival here. And these are 4-year-old fish, so we still have to see what the 5-year return is going to be next year for brood year 2012. And but because they went out as 0+ smolts, they actually have spent 3 years in the ocean. So it'd be equivalent to a 5-year fish if it went out as a 1+. So this is something that we're going to have to obviously look at next year in the adult returns, and obviously these bars will be a little bit different. And just as an aside, I guess we got a little bit confident rearing these fry in the lake again, so we revisited the notion of actually rearing them from emergent fry again, and in the lake using a little bit different techniques. And we did this in 2016, and lower densities, and a different, we would actually change the pens out, so we'd have a clean pen that we'd put underneath the foul pen, and we do that every 5 to 7 days just to make sure. I think that the cleaning in situ was probably part of the reason that we had that IHN outbreak, but we were able to successfully rear these fish in the lake without using the troughs. Because if you want to expand that to a production level, and I'm not suggesting that be done, but if that was the case, then probably the in-lake rearing right from emergent fry right through is a better option than trying to rear them in the troughs. And that's it.